Hi, Dave with Line Therapy here. Today I wanted to go over insurance terminology. We have a lot of patients that come into the clinic that have questions about their insurance. They have questions about the terminology and a lot of confusion related to the terminology with insurance. So I want to do the video today to clarify some of those things. So if you're looking at getting physical therapy, whether that's for scoliosis or whether that's for anything else, that you have a better understanding of terminology, and hopefully I'm also hoping to help clarify some things, some questions that people have about insurance and why insurance is the way it is. It's confusing the way that insurance works here in the US. It's not a fantastic system, and it can get really confusing at times. So hopefully this helps to clarify. Before that, make sure that you we would love you to like and subscribe to the channel so that you can hear more about scoliosis treatment specifically, but also things related to physical therapy treatment, as well as other things that might be helpful. So we try to keep things updated. So let's jump in here. One of the biggest terms that we hear about insurance and payment is the copay. So copay is something that we talk about a lot. A lot of people will talk about, oh, what's my copay? My copay is $20, my copay is $30, or something like that. It's a very common term that's used, and it's not always used correctly. So we have some other terms. We also have something called a co-insurance. So co-insurance is usually a percentage that you're responsible for of the cost of treatment. We'll talk about how these work a little bit. There are a couple of other terms. There's a deductible, and there's an out-of-pocket. So all of these things come into play at different times in treatment. So if we're looking at copay and co-insurance, deductible, and out-of-pocket, these are all different, and they all come into play at different times. So let's talk about one specifically. The biggest one to keep in mind at the first of treatment, whether you're at a PT's office or whether you're at some other medical provider, is the deductible. The deductible is what your insurance requires you to pay before they will contribute anything. So deductibles can range from $300 to, I don't know, $10,000. So deductibles can be very high, and this is what needs to be paid out before the insurance will contribute anything in physical therapy. So if you have a high deductible and you're going to physical therapy, you are basically a self-pay patient. You're going to be paying whatever your insurance's contracted rate is with that PT office. You'll be paying that amount until that deductible is met. So let's say each treatment is $100, just for ease of talking about this. If you have a $300 deductible, you go 3 times to physical therapy, and then your insurance starts to pay for treatment. If you have a $10,000 deductible and each visit is $100, you can go a long time in physical therapy without your insurance paying a dime towards your treatment. So you have to meet the deductible before the co-pay or the co-insurance kicks in. So after the deductible, remember, you always have to meet that first. Then you might switch to a copay, so your insurance might require you to pay $20. I've even seen copays as high as $75. So remember, that's after you've met your deductible. Then you switch to a copay, and you pay that at each visit. So that's at every visit. If you have a co-insurance, so you won't have a copay and a co-insurance, you will have one or the other. That's an important thing to remember. If you have a copay, then you pay the copay at each visit. If you have a co-insurance, you pay a co-insurance at each visit. Usually these are like 20%, 30%, something like that. So you pay 20% or 30% of whatever your insurance's contracted rate is with that provider. When I say insurance's contracted rate, because your insurance does an adjustment. I can bill whatever I want as a PT, but the insurance company, if I'm contracted with them, will cut that down and say, that's great that you billed this much, we're actually going to pay you this much. And that amount is what goes towards the deductible, and that amount is how we calculate the coinsurance. So again, you meet your deductible first, whatever that amount is, then it switches to either a copay or a coinsurance. And then you pay that copay or coinsurance until you've paid enough to meet your out-of-pocket. So usually in out-of-pocket, it's usually higher than the deductible. Well, it's always higher than the deductible. So that could be like, I don't know, $3,000 to $15,000 or something like that. And so all of your copays and all of your coinsurance, that all goes towards your out-of-pocket. So once you've paid out of your own pocket this amount, then the insurance covers everything. So they pay for everything. You don't pay your copay, you don't pay your coinsurance anymore. You just go get treatment and the insurance pays. Usually that out-of-pocket amount is fairly high. I do have a lot of patients who have a lot of health issues and they hit their out-of-pocket fairly early in the year, but most of the time, most people are not going to hit their out-of-pocket in the year. So a couple of big takeaways. If you have a high deductible, whether you're in network or out of network, you're basically a self-pay patient. So you're paying the cost of the treatment that you're receiving until you've met that deductible. So once you meet that deductible, then we switch to the copay or the coinsurance. So don't make the mistake of thinking that if you have a high deductible that you go in and only you're paying your copay every time and the insurance is picking up the rest, because they're not. They're leaving that amount for you until you've met your deductible. So that helps when you get a bill later on after physical therapy to realize that's why I got a bill from physical therapy, because I hadn't met my deductible yet. One takeaway is if you meet your deductible or you meet your out-of-pocket, let your provider know as soon as possible so they aren't collecting towards the deductible or they're not collecting your copay if you've met your out-of-pocket. That will help so you don't need refunds and you're not paying more than you need to. So another thing to think about, in healthcare in the US, we have a lot of different types of providers. So depending on where your practice is or what setting it's in, the allowable for the insurance or how much the insurance allows the provider to charge is either up or down. So if you're going to a PT clinic, for example, that's in a hospital-based system, most insurances allow them to bill a lot more. They're allowable to collect from that visit is usually about twice as much as it is for someone in an outpatient clinic like mine. So keep that in mind when you're seeing a physical therapist in the hospital setting, that you're going to be paying more, especially if you have a high deductible. You're going to be paying more each visit than if you were seeing someone in private practice that's not associated with the hospital. We'll do another video on this, but there's a reason that a lot of small private practices are going out of business. And that's because they're being either bought up by bigger companies that have more power and more ability to renegotiate contracts, and so they can get paid more, or they're just not getting paid enough to cover their costs and they're going out of business. And that's a huge problem. In my opinion, it's a huge problem with the way our healthcare system used to be, with having smaller clinics and knowing our patients better and having personalized care, and now having big corporations that are buying up clinics that don't really care about the individual patient, but they have so many providers that they can renegotiate with insurances and get higher reimbursement, which makes it so their business model works better where small clinics like mine, we really can't renegotiate our contracts because we're so small. Insurance companies, they have no incentive to renegotiate with us. And so that forces us to either pack patients in, so we're seeing more patients in an hour, which is not great care, or it forces us to drop insurance contracts, which we've had to do because the allowable rate is not sustainable for us. So I'm going to do a different video on that. That was just a little teaser, I guess, for that. But it's important to understand what's happening with your insurance, especially as we see more high deductible plans and we see more high co-insurance and co-pays. A lot of the cost of treatment, especially in physical therapy, is being borne by the patient. And insurance companies really aren't paying out as much as they used to, except for the ones that can meet their deductible. And ideally, we're not meeting our deductibles, but that can't happen. One thing that's interesting is in my practice with spine patients, a lot of my spine patients come to me having had an x-ray, having had an MRI, possibly having a scoliosis brace, possibly having multiple images and testing and things like that. And that can drive up the cost and meet the deductible and meet the out-of-pocket very quickly. But my question is, how much of that is actually necessary? Hopefully it's all necessary and we're not utilizing things that we don't need to. But what I see a lot of times is like someone with sciatica because of a disc bulge. They don't necessarily need an MRI. We should be treating that, and if we can treat that and get it to respond, we can avoid the cost of the MRI. We can avoid the cost of epidural injections and things like that. But a lot of times, specifically in the US, the way that we practice medicine is we do a lot of imaging, we do a lot of testing before we actually start to address the underlying problem. The person may just be crazy weak in their core muscles and have really tight hamstrings and things like that. Until that's addressed, the injection isn't going to last very long. The MRI isn't going to really change anything. It's just going to give an image. So proactively treating patients and not reactively treating or doing unnecessary things can save us a lot of money in this scenario. So I guess one big takeaway is advocate for yourself. Make sure that you know what's going on. Make sure you know your benefits. Make sure you know how to work within the insurance system. We've decided about half of our patients are self-pay patients who have decided not to work within the insurance system, and it's actually refreshing to do that. But look for more videos as we talk more about these things. And I appreciate you watching. Don't forget to subscribe and check out our other videos, especially if you have scoliosis or other spinal deformities. Check out our other videos, they'll be really helpful. Thanks.